In the distant reaches of space, on the forest-covered planet of Calypso 4, Eli, a young astrophysics student on an interscholastic exchange, wandered far beyond the boundaries of the established research camp. The dense alien forest was lush with bioluminescent plants that cast an eerie glow over the landscape, making the towering trees appear as if from another world. A fitting perception, given Eli's far-off human origins. His curiosity was part of his nature, driven by the dream that one day he might contribute something monumental to human understanding of the cosmos. On this day, his explorations were powered by rumors of unusual electromagnetic readings reported by his peers, dismissed by professors as mere equipment malfunctions. Eli, however, suspected differently. As he ventured deeper, the forest abruptly gave way to a clearing where the sunlight, filtered through Calypso 4's thick atmosphere, illuminated the wreckage of what was unmistakably an alien spacecraft. The ship, sleek and jagged, bore the scars of a violent descent, its hull punctured and charred, half swallowed by the undergrowth. Approaching cautiously, Eli's heart pounded with a mix of adrenaline and academic fascination. The ship was unlike any design he had studied. It was clearly advanced, with an aerodynamic form and materials that shimmered with an almost iridescent quality, even in the dim light. His hand hovered over his communicator, tempted to call this in, but the thrill of discovery urged him to first inspect closer himself. Inside the craft, the technology was even more astounding. Panels of unknown alloys lined the walls, and holographic interfaces flickered sporadically, struggling to stay active. It was then that he heard it, a faint groaning sound from the rear of the ship. Following the noise, he found her. Lyra was unlike any being Eli had ever seen. Her skin was a pale shade of blue with subtle silver markings that traced intricate patterns down her arms and face. She lay among the debris, clearly injured, her bright, fearful eyes fixing on Eli as he approached. In her gaze, he saw intelligence and pain, but also an unmistakable wariness of the human before her. "I'm here to help," Eli said softly, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. He knew how delicate first contact protocols were, even though he was no diplomat. Extending a hand slowly, he watched her eyes track the movement. She spoke then, in a language he could not understand, melodic and fluid, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space of the damaged ship. Rummaging through his backpack, Eli pulled out a medical kit and a portable translator, a standard issue for students in the field. He activated the device, hoping it could handle the alien language. After a moment, it flickered to life and began to translate her words. "Please, no harm," came the translated plea, her voice weak. Eli nodded. "No harm," he repeated, setting the translator between them and starting to tend to her wounds with the basic medical supplies he had. As he worked, the translator facilitated a rudimentary conversation, bridging the vast gulf between their species with each exchanged sentence. Over the next hours, Eli managed to stabilize her condition, using his limited supplies and the ship's medical technology, which she instructed him to use through the translator. As trust grew tentatively between the two, Lyra explained that she was a scout from the Arcturan constellation, forced to land after an unexpected meteoroid collision damaged her ship and communication systems. Night was falling on Calypso 4, and with it came the chilling realization that they were not safe out in the open. Eli helped Lyra move to a more concealed part of her ship, away from prying eyes that might belong to anyone or anything drawn by the crash. As the alien night took hold, casting long shadows through the glowing forest, Eli and Lyra planned their next moves, unaware that this was just the beginning of a much larger adventure. The makeshift laboratory Eli had set up was not your typical research space. Hidden deep within the dense forests of Calypso 4, it was housed inside an old shipping container that Eli had retrofitted with salvaged equipment from the research camp. Over time, he had transformed it into a refuge for his more unconventional experiments, those not strictly aligned with his curriculum, but fueled by his boundless curiosity about alien technologies and physics. With Lyra's conditions stabilized but still precarious, Eli knew this secluded lab would be the safest place to nurse her back to health while keeping her hidden from any potentially hostile forces that might be interested in an Arcturan. Under the cover of night, Guided by the bioluminescent glow of the flora, Eli carefully helped Lyra navigate the treacherous terrain. She leaned heavily on him, her body frail, but her spirit determined. As they arrived at the hideout, Lyra's eyes widened in a mix of amazement and confusion at the sight of human ingenuity meshed with bits and pieces of technology from various origins. Eli's lab was cluttered with gadgets and gizmos, screens displaying data streams, and tools hanging from every conceivable spot. At the center of this controlled chaos stood a jury-rigged medical bed, which Eli had assembled from spare parts and modified with medical technology he'd studied. "I know it's not much, but it's safe here," Eli assured her as he helped her onto the bed. He began hooking her up to various devices, monitoring her vital signs while continuing to administer treatments based on the medical protocols he had gleaned from her ship's database. Lyra watched him work, her expression a mix of gratitude and curiosity about the young human who had so abruptly become her caretaker. The following days were a crash course in interspecies medicine and diplomacy for Eli. He used the lab's equipment to synthesize medications that could work with Lyra's unique biology, all the while learning about her culture and technology. Lyra, in turn, shared insights into Arcturan technology that Eli had only dreamed of understanding. She explained the workings of her ship's propulsion systems, the principles behind her people's advanced cloaking technology, and much more. As their knowledge exchange deepened, so did their bond. What started as a simple rescuer-rescuee relationship slowly evolved into a partnership. Eli found Lyra's insights into the universe and its myriad laws to be profoundly enlightening, while Lyra discovered a newfound respect for human resourcefulness and creativity. Their peaceful routine, however, could not last. Eli began to notice drones, likely sent by bounty hunters or rival science factions, scouting the area. The news of a downed Arcturan ship must have spread, attracting those who sought to exploit or capture Lyra for their own ends. With each passing day, the risk of discovery grew higher. Recognizing the dangers, Eli decided to upgrade the lab's security systems. Using a combination of salvaged parts from Lyra's ship and his own technical know-how, he rigged a network of sensors and camouflaged traps around the perimeter of the hideout. Lyra contributed to the effort by integrating some of her own technology, enhancing their defensive measures with Arcturan modifications that were light years ahead of human tech. Together, they fortified their sanctuary, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Eli knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, but with Lyra's alien technology and his own cunning, they had a fighting chance. As the first signs of an impending attack materialized on the horizon, Eli and Lyra readied themselves. They were no longer just scholar and alien, they were comrades, standing against the coming storm. As Eli and Lyra strengthened their defenses around the makeshift laboratory, word of the downed Arcturan ship had indeed spread like wildfire through the underground networks of bounty hunters and mercenaries. These groups, drawn by the allure of advanced technology and the prestige of capturing an Arcturan, began converging towards the location pinpointed by their scattered drones. Eli was aware that keeping Lyra safe would require more than just physical defenses. It necessitated staying ahead of their pursuers mentally and strategically. To gather intelligence, Eli made frequent covert trips to the local market under the guise of scavenging for parts. The market was a bustling hub of activity, where information flowed as freely as the trade in exotic goods. It was during one such visit that Eli overheard snippets of conversation hinting at a coordinated effort to locate the Arcturan. Bounty hunters were pooling resources using advanced tracking techniques that could potentially compromise their hidden sanctuary. Eli hurried back, his mind racing with plans and countermeasures. Back at the lab, he relayed the news to Lyra, who remained calm, her face betraying none of the concern that flickered in her eyes. "We must assume they will find us eventually," she stated matter-of-factly. "Our preparations should focus on ensuring we can withstand an assault or escape if necessary." The duo spent the next few days not only bolstering their defenses, but also setting up multiple fallback plans. Lyra, whose health was steadily improving thanks to Eli's care and her own robust physiology, took an active role in the preparations. She taught Eli how to operate some of the basic functions of her portable Arcturan technology, tools that could mask energy signatures or create holographic diversions. Meanwhile, Eli worked on setting up a network of sensors that would alert them to any intrusion within a kilometer of their hideout. He modified drones to patrol the forest, equipped with cameras and thermal sensors, creating a live feed of their surroundings that he monitored from multiple screens within the lab. Their efforts were tested sooner than expected. A drone, cleverly disguised as a bird, breached their perimeter, bypassing some of their simpler traps. It wasn't until it was nearly upon their hideout that one of Lyra's devices detected it and neutralized it with an electromagnetic pulse. Examining the downed drone, Lyra and Eli realized that these bounty hunters were more sophisticated and resourceful than they had anticipated. The incident spurred them into further action. Eli developed a scrambling device that would make it difficult for electronic sensors to pinpoint their exact location, while Lyra worked on a miniaturized version of her ship's cloaking technology, albeit much weaker and only capable of cloaking small areas. Their preparations took on a new urgency as more drones began to appear with increasing frequency. Each encounter was a lesson, and each lesson improved their defenses. Through these tense days, Eli and Lyra's initial wariness of each other morphed into a solid trust, each impressed by the other's ingenuity and determination. One evening, as they sat reviewing the sensor feeds, Lyra turned to Eli, her expression more serious than usual. "If they capture me," she began hesitantly, "you must erase all data regarding my technology and my presence here. Promise me, Eli." Eli looked at her, struck by the gravity of her request, but nodded firmly. "I promise, Lyra, but we're not going to let it come to that. We'll fight them off together." As they resumed their vigil, watching the shadows move on the screens, both knew that a confrontation was inevitable. But they also knew that they were no longer facing it alone. Each had found an unexpected ally in the other, and that alliance had forged a formidable team. As the night deepened, they were ready, come what may. The silence of the night was shattered by the sudden wail of alarms. Eli sprang to his feet from where he had been dozing in front of the monitors, heart hammering in his chest as the screens flashed with the movement of multiple figures approaching through the dense underbrush. The bounty hunters had decided to make their move under the cover of darkness, believing it would give them the advantage of surprise. Lyra was already at the control panel, her fingers flying over the holographic interface as she activated the various defensive measures they had painstakingly put in place. "They're splitting into two groups, trying to flank us," she noted, her voice calm despite the imminent threat. Eli watched the monitors, his mind racing. "I'll take the east side. Trigger the EMP mines when they get within range on the west," he instructed, grabbing a plasma rifle they had salvaged and repaired from Lyra's ship. Lyra nodded, her own weapon in hand, a compact Arcturan device capable of stunning an opponent with non-lethal force. As Eli slipped out of the back exit of the container, he moved stealthily, using the training he had received at the academy for just such scenarios. The forest was a second home to him now. He knew every shadow and every sound. His heart pounded not just with fear, but with a fierce determination to protect his friend and their shared secrets. The first group of bounty hunters, armed and cautious, advanced slowly, unaware of the network of sensors and traps laid out for them. As they crossed the threshold Eli had marked earlier in the day, he signaled Lyra. A deep hum filled the air briefly as the EMP mines activated, sending bursts of electromagnetic energy that fried the hunters' electronic equipment and disoriented them. Taking advantage of their confusion, Eli took aim and fired. The plasma rifle's shots were precise, each one hitting its mark, taking down two hunters non-lethally as they scrambled to understand what had hit them. The others took cover, firing blindly towards the direction of the shots. Meanwhile, Lyra confronted the second group. She used her device to create a holographic image of herself several meters away from her actual location. As the hunters fired at the illusion, she quietly circled behind them. One by one, she stunned them, her device emitting a silent, powerful wave of energy that left them incapacitated. Despite their initial successes, the fight was far from over. More hunters emerged from the shadows, more prepared and wary of the traps. They began to use thermal scanners to detect their hidden targets. Eli and Lyra retreated towards each other, back to back, ready for the next wave. Then, from the darkness, came a new challenge. One of the hunters, equipped with a heavy-duty exoskeleton, made his way toward Eli, impervious to the plasma shots. Eli ducked behind a tree, narrowly avoiding a blast from the hunter's energy weapon. He knew they needed to rethink their strategy fast. "Lyra! The EMP!" he yelled over the sound of gunfire. Understanding immediately, Lyra tapped her device, enhancing the power of the next pulse. This time, the electromagnetic wave was stronger, its radius wider. The exoskeleton-wearing hunter staggered as his suit powered down, suddenly vulnerable. Eli didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, using the rifle's butt to knock the hunter unconscious. Breathing heavily, he looked over to find Lyra disabling the last of their assailants with her stun device. As the immediate threat subsided, they quickly collected any technology the hunters had used, dragging the unconscious bodies into hidden restraints. They knew this was only the first attempt. Others would follow, each more dangerous than the last. But as they stood in the quiet forest, catching their breaths, there was a moment of unspoken acknowledgement between them. They had survived this assault together, and they would face the next the same way. After repelling the first assault, Eli and Lyra knew that their current location was no longer secure. The bounty hunters would undoubtedly return, likely in greater numbers and with more sophisticated tactics. They needed to find a safer place, somewhere more defensible and less accessible. In the pre-dawn hours, under the ghostly light of Calypso 4's twin moons, Eli and Lyra hastily packed essential equipment and technology from the lab into a rugged, all-terrain vehicle Eli had been restoring in his spare time. The plan was to head to an ancient outpost Eli had discovered years ago during his initial explorations of the planet. It was deep in the uncharted territories of the northern forests, a place so enveloped in myths and natural hazards that few dared to venture there. As they drove through the dense forest, the rough terrain jostled them relentlessly. Lyra, still not fully recovered from her injuries, grimaced, but kept her focus on the portable scanner, watching for any signs of pursuit. Eli maneuvered the vehicle with skilled precision, his eyes constantly scanning the environment for potential dangers. "This outpost," Lyra asked, her voice tense over the roar of the engine. "What can we expect there?" "It's old. Probably predates the current colonial era. I think it was a research facility abandoned for reasons lost to time," Eli explained, swerving to avoid a large boulder. "It's built like a fortress, and there's only one way in or out. We should be able to fortify it easily." The journey took them deeper into the wilds of Calypso 4, through towering ferns and past luminous waterfalls. The alien beauty of the landscape was overshadowed by the urgency of their escape. After several hours, they approached a steep ravine that marked the last barrier to their destination. The outpost lay beyond, hidden among the cliffs. Navigating the ravine required them to abandon the vehicle and proceed on foot. They concealed the vehicle with netting and foliage, then gathered their most critical equipment. The climb was treacherous, the path narrow and littered with loose stones. Eli went ahead, securing ropes for Lyra to use to steady herself. As they climbed, the sound of a distant explosion rolled through the valley below. Eli glanced back, his face set in grim lines. "They found the vehicle! We need to move faster!" he urged. Lyra nodded, pushing her aching body to its limits. Reaching the top of the ravine, they finally saw the outpost. It was a stark, imposing structure made of dark stone and metal, half swallowed by the encroaching forest. The main entrance was sealed with a heavy metal door, overgrown with vines. Eli approached the door, pulling out a small device he had prepared earlier, a universal lockpicker he had fashioned from bits of scavenged technology. Within moments, the door groaned open, revealing dark, dusty halls lit only by the light of their torches. The interior of the outpost was a labyrinth of corridors and rooms filled with old equipment and debris. They chose a central room with a clear view of the only entrance to set up their new base. As Eli and Lyra worked to clear the space, they discussed their next steps. "We'll need to set up sensors and traps like before, but this time we'll make them more complex, harder to detect," Eli said, unrolling a map of the outpost on an old table. Lyra, examining the technology left behind in the outpost, found several devices that could be repurposed. "This place may be old, but some of these systems are still functional. We could use them to enhance our defenses," she suggested, her mind already racing with possibilities. As they worked to secure the outpost, transforming it into a fortified haven, the reality of their situation settled around them. They were far from safety, surrounded by unknown dangers, but for the moment, they were once again one step ahead of their enemies. In the quiet that followed their frantic efforts, a fragile sense of security began to take root, bolstered by the strength of their newfound partnership. The outpost, now a fortified refuge, provided Eli and Lyra a temporary reprieve from their pursuers. Yet the isolation of their new sanctuary couldn't dispel the lingering tension that any moment they might again be discovered. They needed more than just walls and traps. They needed information and perhaps additional hands to help defend their position. As they continued to set up defenses, Eli ventured further into unexplored sections of the outpost. In a remote wing, far from their central command room, he stumbled upon a hidden chamber. Inside, he found a group of outcasts, fugitives like himself, albeit for different reasons. These were former researchers and their families who had fled the oppressive regimes of distant colonies, seeking asylum in the forgotten corners of Calypso 4. Initially, the meeting was tense. The outcasts were wary of Eli, his advanced equipment, and more so when they learned of Lyra's alien nature. However, Eli's diplomatic approach, honed by his academic background in interspecies relations, slowly eased their fears. He explained their situation, the threat of the bounty hunters, and how Lyra's presence could inadvertently put them all at risk. One of the outcasts, a grizzled old engineer named Martin, stepped forward. "We've been hiding from the authorities for months, using this outpost as our shelter. We've got skills. We can make things work that shouldn't, and maybe together, we can hold off whoever's coming for you." Eli brought the group back to meet Lyra, ensuring transparency. Lyra, with her innate understanding of trust-building from her own cultural practices, shared her knowledge of advanced technology and her peaceful intentions. Her earnestness and the visible proof of her vulnerability and dependence on Eli's help softened the group's initial distrust. The outcasts, in turn, shared their deep knowledge of the outpost's systems. They revealed hidden resources, old defense mechanisms, supply caches, and energy sources that Eli and Lyra hadn't discovered. With their help, the defenses were not only restored, but significantly improved. The outpost slowly transformed from a makeshift shelter into a well-defended fortress. In the days that followed, Eli and the outcasts worked on enhancing the sensor nets and defensive traps around the perimeter, incorporating both human and Arcturan technology. They set up surveillance drones that could be remotely controlled from inside the outpost, providing them with a view of the surrounding areas without exposing them to direct danger. Lyra, feeling a growing sense of responsibility toward their new allies, conducted workshops to teach everyone basic Arcturan technology handling and safety protocols. Her sessions, initially met with apprehension, soon became a center of lively interaction and mutual curiosity. This sharing of knowledge helped to cement a burgeoning sense of community among the group. Meanwhile, Martin and his daughter Gia, a talented programmer, worked closely with Eli to create a fail-safe system that could lock down the outpost in case of a breach. Gia, intrigued by Eli's descriptions of other worlds, frequently asked Lyra questions about the universe, her people, and their technology, often leading to long discussions that, while filled with the stress of their situation, also brought moments of wonder and excitement. Their preparations and growing camaraderie fortified not just the outpost's defenses, but also their collective morale. They were no longer isolated individuals fighting for survival. They had become a community, a small enclave of diverse beings united by common goals. As the days passed into weeks, the outpost's routines settled into a new normal. The threat of an attack was ever present, but with their combined strengths, the group felt ready to face whatever challenges came next. Eli and Lyra, once solely reliant on each other, now found strength in their unlikely alliance, their bond deepening in the shared fight for a safer future. As the days blended into weeks, the tranquil life within the outpost began to feel almost normal. Eli, Lyra, and their newfound allies had successfully transformed the ancient structure into a formidable bastion, teeming with life and cooperative endeavor. Yet beneath the routine activities, there was a palpable undercurrent of tension, a collective anticipation of the inevitable confrontation with the bounty hunters. Their vigilance paid off one cool, misty morning when the outpost's perimeter sensors triggered an alarm. The surveillance feeds displayed a large contingent of bounty hunters, better equipped and more numerous than the last batch. They were organized and moving with clear intent, their movements coordinated and cautious as they encroached upon the forest that surrounded the outpost. Eli, who had grown into his role as a leader, quickly coordinated the defense. "Positions, everyone. Remember the plan," he instructed calmly, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. The group, now a cohesive unit, moved into their designated roles with practiced ease. Lyra, standing beside Eli, monitored the advancing forces through the outpost's enhanced sensors. "They've brought military-grade tech this time. Looks like they're not taking any chances," she noted, her voice tinged with concern. Eli nodded, his gaze fixed on the screens. "Let them come. We're ready for them," he replied with a confidence that he hoped was more reassuring than he felt. He then turned to Gia, who was manning the outpost's electronic warfare station. "Jam their communications. Let's isolate them." Gia's fingers danced across the console, sending out powerful, scrambling signals that immediately disrupted the hunters' comms, sowing confusion among their ranks. Without their ability to coordinate, the bounty hunters hesitated, their advance slowing as they tried to regroup. Using the disruption to their advantage, Martin activated the outpost's external defenses, a series of automated turrets and EMP traps that he had rigged using both human and Arcturan technology. The first wave of bounty hunters walked right into the trap, and chaos erupted as the turrets laid down suppressing fire while the EMPs disabled any electronic equipment they carried. "The left flank is holding, but they're pushing hard on the right," one of the defenders called out. Eli quickly relayed orders to shift some of their firepower to reinforce the right side. Amidst the sounds of battle, Lyra focused her efforts on managing the outpost's energy shields, redistributing power to areas under the heaviest assault. As the fight intensified, a group of bounty hunters managed to breach the outer defenses, making their way toward the main entrance of the outpost. Eli and Lyra, along with a small team, positioned themselves to repel the intruders hand-to-hand if necessary. The close-quarters battle was fierce, and for a moment the outcome hung in the balance. It was Lyra's combat training and Eli's strategic mind that turned the tide. Lyra, using her superior agility and strength, disabled several attackers in quick succession, her movements a blur of efficiency and grace. Eli, meanwhile, used a portable Arcturan device to create a holographic maze, disorienting the intruders and funneling them into a kill zone that Martin and Gia had prepared. After hours of intense fighting, the bounty hunters' resolve began to waver. Realizing the futility of their assault and with their numbers dwindling, they retreated into the forest, leaving behind their wounded and their pride. As the last of the attackers disappeared into the mist, Eli, Lyra, and their team stood among the smoldering remnants of the battle, breathing heavily but alive. They had not only defended their home, but had also solidified their bonds as a unit. The victory was bittersweet, with the reality of continued threats looming over them, but for now, they had won a significant battle. As they tended to their wounded and repaired the damage, there was a new sense of determination among the group. The outpost was more than just a hideaway. It was a symbol of their resilience and unity. Eli and Lyra exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement of the deep bond and mutual respect that had grown between them. Together they had faced formidable odds, and together they would face whatever came next. In the days following their hard-won victory, the atmosphere within the outpost shifted palpably. The threat of another immediate attack had diminished, leaving the group with a mix of relief and reflection on their recent ordeal. Eli and Lyra, in particular, found themselves contemplating the future, both their own and that of the bond they had formed under such extraordinary circumstances. The battle had not only tested their defenses, but had also deepened the trust and camaraderie among the outpost's inhabitants. With each passing day, the group grew more cohesive, turning the once-abandoned outpost into a thriving community of resilience and mutual support. They repaired the battle damages, reinforced their defenses, and continued sharing knowledge and stories from their diverse backgrounds. However, the reality of Lyra's situation was ever present. She was still an alien on a foreign planet, far from her own kind, and despite the safety the outpost provided, she knew her presence continued to pose a risk to her new friends. The bounty hunters had been repelled, but others might come, perhaps in even greater force. One evening, as the twin moons of Calypso 4 cast a soft glow over the outpost, Lyra approached Eli with a decision that had been weighing on her. They stood looking out over the expanse of the forest, a quiet moment amidst the ongoing activity of their sanctuary. "Eli," Lyra began, her voice tinged with a mix of resolve and sadness, "I've contacted my people. They are coming to retrieve me. It's not just for my safety, but for all of you as well." Eli turned to look at her, his heart sinking even as he understood her reasoning. "I know," he said simply, the words heavy with unspoken emotion. "When do they arrive?" 3 days, she replied, watching his face for signs of reaction. The news spread quickly among the group, and the mood became one of preparation and quiet farewells. The outcasts, who had once viewed Lyra with suspicion, now expressed their gratitude for her contributions and the protection she had inadvertently provided. They organized a small farewell gathering, celebrating the unity and strength they had found together. On the night of her departure, the outpost was unusually quiet. The group gathered outside as a sleek Arcturan spacecraft, silent and glowing, descended from the starry sky. It was a stark reminder of the vast universe beyond their secluded life on Calypso 4. Lyra stood beside Eli, her usual composed self, but he could see the emotional tumult beneath her calm exterior. "You've made a difference here, Lyra. To all of us," Eli said, his voice thick with emotion. "And you've changed me. I hope we meet again." Lyra smiled, a genuinely warm expression that reached her eyes. "I have learned much from you, Eli, about courage, friendship, and trust. I will carry those lessons with me." They embraced, a final, lingering goodbye, before Lyra turned and walked towards her people who awaited her arrival. Eli watched as the spacecraft lifted off, disappearing into the cosmos from which it had come. In the silence that followed, Eli felt a profound sense of loss, but also determination. Inspired by what he had experienced, he resolved to pursue a new path. With the support of the outpost's community, he planned to advance his studies and work towards fostering greater understanding and cooperation between humans and other interstellar beings.